What a story, Mark.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Framewreck. I'll put our socials there on the bottom for a little bit because we got someone to bring in just a sec. But welcome to another episode of New Year Nostalgia. Matt, Nostalgia Junction. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. We're so cute in that opening.
I know. Yeah.
Every time you play it, I'm like, gosh, look how adorable we are.
Right. Well, we are very lucky today. We've done a few Nostalgia Junctions of movies from Matt and I's childhood and Matt's teenage adolescence last episode, but we figured we'd open it up to some guests. I think this could be a show where we really bring a guest in to bring their nostalgic, like childhood or young adult favorites to the panel, and we talk about other people's nostalgia, because our nostalgia is fun, but it's fun to also explore our guests' nostalgia. And the person who's guested the most on the show had some great nostalgic hits to share with us, as you saw from the title, Chris's cartoon faves. So we're going to bring him into the chat right now. It is Chris Baker Scott. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going great. I'm excited to be here. I didn't know I guessed it the most on this podcast.
Yeah, you
That's
are the
good.
most
I
frequent
like
Framewreck guest. I imagine, right, Matt? I mean, I haven't done the numbers, but it has to be. It's either
he was
right?
our. Yeah, it's him. You were our first. He was our first guest, right? And then he's been on. Yeah, he's the most.
Long time ago.
Yeah, he's been on the list.
Yeah, but we're excited to dive into Chris's. I assume these are movies from your childhood, right? Because I know Matt last episode was like more adolescents, teens. Is this where, like, what range of time period are we talking about, Chris, for these?
Definitely my childhood. These came out around like 91, 92. I was born in 89, so like I've never known a world without these movies consciously.
Nice.
So I'm really excited.
Nice. And Matt, in terms of your nostalgia for these, have you seen any of these films before?
I'd seen all of these films before. Okay. And I remember distinctly when each of these came out. Like, I remember the Elvis Chicken movie, I want to see that. And then Cool World, I was like, it's like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it looks cooler. And what's the other? Oh, FernGully. FernGully I actually saw in the theater multiple times. My negligent father used to drop my sister and I off at the theater when he wanted to go, I don't know, do whatever. And we would watch this. So we watched it several times that summer, just because my dad needed something for us to do.
Nice. So we're coming at it from three different areas. It's like you who like experienced these movies coming out, like actually being distinctly cognizant of that, and then like Chris, who was like a baby and like grew up not knowing anything else but these films. Like these were already part of life. And then me, who I was born after all these films, so like these are all first watches for me. So it's gonna be a cool kind of like
all of them were.
All of them were. Yeah, I mean, I've heard FernGully for years as like, if you like Aladdin and you love Genie and you love Robin Williams, like he also was an animated voice in this, but that's all I knew. And these other two movies I hadn't heard about until this show came about, and I was like, I need to check these movies out because I never heard of them. But that's what's fun about the show is these are movies that like are staples of childhood that like maybe other people in other generations just don't know. It's cool. It's a cool thing.
There's actually, I assumed you would have heard about it a bit more because your very favorite live action remake is based on FernGully, and that is Avatar by Jim Cameron.
Live action remake.
Literally, when Avatar came out, everyone who was in the know, like, it was just like, oh, this is just FernGully. But like,
I feel like a lot of people, they said FernGully and Pocahontas. So I'd heard of it for sure, but it wasn't like a, I had heard about it recommended because of the Robin Williams thing. But I definitely heard the comparisons with Avatar. But we'll talk about it because I love Avatar. I love both those movies. I like Pocahontas, and we'll see about FernGully. But those are the three movies, just so you all are aware, just because I haven't really officially said it. But the three movies Chris chose for us today were FernGully, The Last Rainforest, Rock-A-Doodle, and Cool World. Matt, where should we start here?
Let's do it picture this style and start alphabetically. Let's start with Cool World.
Cool.
Let me tell you, the fact that Chris and I watched this so much as children tells you everything you need to know about the 90s. Because watching it now, I was like, dear Lord, I watched this as a kid multiple times. I had this had this notion to like watch these with my kids. None of them wanted to, and we decided
Thank God.
FernGully was probably yeah. We decided FernGully was probably a bit too scary, so we didn't watch it with the 5-year-old. But none of them really were interested. This one, I was like, no, I remember watching this. It's fine. No, it was not fine for children. I would never let my kids watch this, even though I tried to. I will say just real quick about the slate itself, and I don't know, Chris, you can address this. I have to assume that this slate was sort of a gaydar as to which character you were attracted to when you were a child, because they're all full of sexy lady cartoons, and they're also all full of like sexy man cartoons. So
it's so weird. Like, I'm trying to think. Okay, with this movie, I don't know why it stuck out to me, right? Because I don't really particularly find anyone in this movie attractive. That's the like, I mean, I think Kim Basinger's character, she's just feisty. I love her feistiness. Brad Pitt, there's something about him that I also really like this grizzled detective that's working, like he's a human though in their world, which is weird. I don't know. Like,
I found everybody in this movie attractive, so that tells you what you need to know about me, I guess.
Okay, even Brad Pitt's like bartender girlfriend. Well, no, she was fine.
She was no, I think that she is, to me, she is more attractive than Kim Basinger's character, even though Kim Basinger's character is sexier. I really like I find the other girl more attractive just based on personality and the type of girl she is. So
yeah,
but
I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where like I don't think they're attractive, but I don't think they're attractive because I think the movie is trying so hard to try to make them attractive and try to make it like this fetishization of, because like this is the same era. I don't know how many years after Who Framed Roger Rabbit this is, maybe like 3 or 4, right? And like this is still in the peak of like the Disney Renaissance, where like a lot of people were like simping over animated cartoons. It was like part of the culture in like a weird way, but also like a way that like everyone could like kind of agree on, like, oh no, they make these characters to look kind of attractive. But I think this whole movie, it almost feels like that's the pitch, and that's kind of where it ends. It's like, we're gonna make a movie about attractive cartoon characters and how people are attracted to cartoon characters, and like, oh yeah, we also have to make a story around it as well. To where I was just kind of amused by it more than anything. I wasn't like, oh wow, she's smoking, but more so like, this is hilarious. This is obviously a riff on like Jessica Rabbit and all those like cartoon, Jasmine from Aladdin, you know, like all the cartoon characters that were kind of sexualized at that time, which makes it a really interesting like historical piece, kind of like what you said, Matt, about the 90s, like kind of where the audience's heads were at, what kind of you know, adults were taking from children's media in a way that they kind of embraced and owned for themselves in a way, kind of like how Pixar, like my era growing up, it was like the adults were like, oh, the sexual innuendo of Buzz's wings popping up when Jesse does that cool thing in Toy Story, like, you know, like that's kind of the stuff my generation talks about, is like these cool little bits for the adults. Like that kind of felt like what this movie was kind of embodying, was like, what are the bits that the adults love in these animated movies that make them family films in a way.
In the 90s,
it's just like, no, they're just gonna bone. Like they're just...
right. This is very overt. There are no innuendos here.
I was about to say, in the 90s, we were like, what's innuendo? I don't know what that means. Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out in 88, right?
Yeah,
that sounds about
88 or
right.
89.
I think 88. So this was 4 years after Who Framed Roger Rabbit. They were definitely capitalizing on that. I will say that, and this is so weird to talk about because she's a cartoon and stuff, which I don't know why it's weird to talk about right now, but it is. It feels weird to talk about right now. But what I'm going to say is that there's a part in this movie that I think is the sexiest scene in I was about to say in the slate. The other two are children's movies. In this movie, which is when Brad Pitt tells her to keep her legs crossed, and then as he leaves, she opens them in a very provocative way. I think I love that scene, but not simply because of the sexiness, but it is an act of resistance against patriarchy, and which I love. That was one of those redeeming qualities I found in this movie, is that there, despite the fact that she is a villain, I guess she
that's the thing. She's a villain,
motivation so much. Yeah.
Like, because I'm not completely sure if she is the villain. Like, I mean, she does
Depends on
bad
what
things,
part
I
of the movie you're in,
guess.
really, for
She
that.
just
But
wanted to like do a performance in like a bar in the real world. She just wanted to like,
yeah. So yeah, that aspect of it, I really enjoyed. Chris, um, I want to know about your revisit. How long has it been since you've revisited this movie? And when you revisited it, did you have different feelings than you did when you were a kid?
okay, here's the thing. I think I had watched it one time when I was like in my early 20s, like maybe
Mhm.
20. And that was my realization, like, oh my God, like you had the realization, oh, this movie is not good. So I knew kind of going into it, I was like, okay, it's gonna be, you know, not really a childhood, like a children's movie. It's just not.
Right.
But then I have this other knowledge. I think back when I revisited it a while ago, like when I was in my 20s, I like realized that it's a Ralph Bakshi film. And at that point, I had watched other films by him, so I knew what his style of filmmaking is. Like I had watched American Pop by then,
Mhm.
Fritz the Cat, like all that stuff.
Yes.
So I knew, like, oh, that's why this movie is the way that it is. And that
Mhm.
was still kind of going into it again, like that's what this movie just is. It's animated. I no longer had that pretense of thinking like animation is for kids as I did when I was a kid. Because as a kid, you
Right.
think animation is for you.
Right.
So yeah, didn't have to come with that reckoning. So I was
Mhm.
just like, okay, Wild Ride. It's kind of like a not a caper movie. It's an action movie to a degree, but it's about like this femme fatale,
It's got
and
a
it's
little
all
noir
that
in it,
going
a
in.
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's closer to like a noir film.
Mhm.
So I had that going into it.
Right. Um, Ralph Bakshi for me is always the Lord of the like he made my first version of Lord of the Rings.
All right,
So
yeah.
like for me that's always what I think about when I think of him because and here's the thing, like I've seen some other Ralph Bakshi stuff, but that is what sticks in my head all the time. And the other Lord of the Rings stuff was made by Rankin and Bass. So in my mind,
Mhm.
Bakshi and Rankin and Bass are similar in style, but they're not.
Right.
They're
Okay.
not when it comes down to it.
So this is really specific to Ralph Bakshi for me.
Yeah.
Like, again, another movie that's kind of nostalgic for me growing up. I loved The Fifth Element and had that movie on VHS. I recently got a VHS copy in my adulthood because I'm collecting tapes again. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But
Cool.
I just specifically remember the VHS copy of The Fifth Element had a trailer for American Pop. Like, and I'd watched it so many times as a kid because I thought that trailer was the coolest thing. Like, it made me want to watch the movie. I didn't have access to it at the time. So I always think of Ralph Bakshi kind of ties into the Fifth Element of all things. It's so weird that that's how that works in my brain.
Yeah, that's really funny. The I love that you're collecting VHS again.
Yeah.
Well, and because people may not know this, and don't go look for it, but Chris and I used to do a podcast together
Do not
back
go look for it.
Ooh, I did not know this. I will be looking. I will not tell you if I find it.
we used to do a podcast back in the day, and a big running theme in there is how much of a fucking hipster Chris is, and we would do like hipster tests and stuff like that. And he would always be a hipster, and I love that you collect VHS tapes because that's the most hipster thing you could
It's
do right
honestly
now.
fun, and the nostalgia factor is great. Like
Mhm.
when you pop in a tape and like it has like that look to it, and it has old trailers. So good, so
Oh,
fun.
believe me, I love catching those old trailers. Yeah, I love. I have a bunch of VHS still, but I I love that you that you collect them. That's so cool. Um, so as in terms of quality, Chris, how did you feel
Quality,
about this rewatch?
honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, is it too soon to say which is my favorite of the three? I think I may have
No.
already said it.
Say whenever.
My favorite of the three is Cool World.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I think honestly it's easier to revisit because it's nothing against children's movie. I love a lot of children's media, but there's something that I can really like hang on to, grasp with this movie that just keeps my attention. Like, I like the story, I like where it's going. I'm fine with the confusing aspects of it. Like, why is Brad Pitt just kind of just he takes his new situation of being in this cartoon world like super like
So
normal.
seriously. Yeah, like
And very seriously. Like, but he treats it like, well, this is it.
I'm here. I guess this is what I do now.
Like, was there a time shift, I guess, when he got into the accident? I think there was, and like he had lived in this world for X amount of years.
Well, because that he just come home from what? Vietnam or World War II? World War II.
I think it was World War II.
Yeah, because
then
the
he gets
beginning
into
of
the
this
bike
is very.
accident.
This is so weird, but the beginning of this is very similar to Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes, yeah, with the motorcycle crash. Yeah. You never thought you'd hear that on this podcast. A Cool World, Lawrence of Arabia, same world.
So he comes back from World War II and has the motorcycle crash, and then the
scientist,
the Gabriel Byrne stuff is set modern day for them.
In like the 90s. Yeah.
It's like 47 years later.
Yeah.
Is what it's.
Yeah. So he's been there for a while, and apparently you don't age in that world, in Cool World. I need to talk because okay. So in terms of quality, this was the middle of the pack for me in terms of the three movies, because it does keep my attention, because I did. There are parts of it that I really, really enjoy. There's some of it that I'm like, what is happening in this movie right now? Which is not necessarily bad, but it does make but it does kind of change my feelings on it a little bit. I do want to ask about, can you guys tell me the reason that Gabriel Byrne's character was a murderer?
That had no bearing, I don't think.
I think it was mostly for like, hey, we're doing a noir. Let's make sure everyone has some edge to them. Let's make sure everyone's kind of like morally ambiguous in this world. Like, I really think that was basically it, to give him some sort of sinister like undertones, just because they want to make everyone kind of this like, morally gray figure in the way,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of what I got. Yeah.
Well, he's released from prison, and he has to like kind of navigate his life after that. So I mean, I guess it does make sense. So like I think, to your point, Dylan, I think you are right. He has to like, what's the word? He's easier to be convinced to like go into this cool world because he is down on his luck and like he's been released from prison. I don't know why it had to be murder though.
Right. Well, I don't. My thing is like, okay, convincing him, but he always goes he almost always goes involuntarily into the cool world. Which, number one, would have been more interesting if he had been in prison through the whole movie, because suddenly he's not in a cell anymore, and then like what's going on there, like that would have made it a little more interesting. Number two, it's mentioned once and then isn't like you're like, okay, so there's a stigma with this guy, but no, the neighbors help him immediately.
The neighbors love him.
Yeah, there's no stigma. It doesn't come up when he's in Cool World. Like nothing is revisited from that. I guess it's to make him seem edgier because of this Cool World, but it's the 90s. I mean, it's not hard to make someone edgy in a 90s movie. So that's I just thought that was very, very interesting that they just kind of threw that in there. And I assume my assumption is that they're trying to they were trying a little bit of world building for sequels, which they clearly wanted to make by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably what they were doing there. But I just wish that there would have been something. They had revisited it, talked about it again, done anything, because he starts out in prison and then immediately gets out, and then someone says, you killed the guy sleeping with your wife, and then nothing ever again.
Never addressed again.
Because the interesting thing about him is that he's this artist, and this cartoon world is real.
But people like his art too. Like,
yeah,
seemingly.
Yeah,
like to your point, Matt, there's no stigma there because people like his art. He seems to be fine. I mean, he just killed someone, but other than that, everything is pretty good. But he's brooding, I guess. I mean, he gives me kind of like a Frank Miller-esque kind of character. But
Yeah.
I guess so. If Brad Pitt's character had found out about it, and then suddenly he didn't trust this guy more, like he had more of a reason to go after him, that would have made sense.
Okay,
But
don't punch up the movie.
Sorry, that's what we do here. We always remake movies.
Yeah,
It actually would have been
version.
good if he had been like, "Oh, he's killed before," so that adds to like, okay,
yeah. I don't know. It was a weird addition to this movie. I imagine there's something on the cutting room floor that maybe had paid it off later, but.
Well, also, I and this is the part that's most intriguing for me is the kind of behind the scenes stuff of this movie because famously, you know, Ralph Bakshi wanted to make something very like hard R, very edgy, very dark, and I think one of the producers, Frank Mancuso Jr., who was the son of the Paramount president, Frank Mancuso, basically when he was greenlit, kind of like rewrote most of the movie or concept. And I read that there was an altercation between the two of them where Bakshi quite literally punched him in the face. But he has since gone on the record to say he has not done that and he wants to set the record straight. But he might just be trying to revise history a little bit. But just the fact that like there was so much tension, I do wonder if maybe there was a lot of darker stuff to do with the murder that was cut out because of violence or because they wanted, because this is a PG-13 movie, which is still at that time PG-13 is getting closer to R than R
PG-13 nowadays. Meant like
it's going there.
There's no crazy murder here or dead bodies.
Yeah, but still, it's pushing.
There will be a boob every now and then.
Right. So I think that's kind of why, like, at times I feel like this almost feels like it's missing that extra step. Like, and that's why things like the murder feel like they're kind of just brushed under the rug. Because I'm wondering if there's certain things that are developed upon further. But I do love that whole like behind the scenes idea of like producer interference, and it still ends up being this edgy. And like you said, Chris, like PG-13 is really pushing it. Like I still think it's amazing that after the studio interference to tone it down, it still ends up being this. Which you know, nowadays if the studio wants you to tone it down, it's going to be toned down. You know, you're not getting the word pecker in this movie. You know, and it's said very often.
Oh God, well, and the fact that it's toned down and we see a full sexual encounter between a man and which we don't really see him throughout it, but we see her having sex with this man throughout the movie. I feel like he should have turned into a cartoon and she turned into a real person. That would have been it. I'm sorry, I keep punching up the movie.
It's the Enchanted thing. It's you're pitching Enchanted in a way, which it's another reason I was intrigued by this because I've seen Enchanted. I was one of my nostalgic favorites growing up, so it's like one of those things where it's cool to see like this darker, edgier version of a similar story. The animated people cross over into the live action go to animated, and you know, one decides to stay, one decides to go, and Idina Menzel. Like, I don't know, it was very interesting to see the similarities, but like just a total different tonal experience for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was when I was a kid. I remember I watched this a few times, but like the big like adult cartoon that I really liked was Bebe's Kids. Chris, do you remember Bebe's Kids?
Yes, that could have been another childhood like nostalgic cartoon for me. To this day, well, you know what? I haven't revisited it in a minute, but I remember loving this movie.
So
Bebe's Kids?
Bebe's Kids. So Bebe's Kids, when it came out, it was like, oh, it's this adult cartoon that my mom's letting me watch, which I watched basically everything my mom watched. So that was not, so I didn't really have restrictions when it came to that. But I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, this is so like adult edgy. I think Bebe's Kids says like damn once.
And it's definitely like it's family friendly. It's like
but I always thought that it was like the adult cartoon from my childhood. I did not remember this movie well enough to because this was in my mind tamer than Bebe's Kids. But no, Bebe's Kids is a children's movie. Could be a children's movie today. Like that's how
it's wild that you brought that up. I hadn't thought about that movie in so long. Like that's so funny.
Nice. Okay. I don't have anything else.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. I think we said a lot. Yeah. I think stylistically it's cool. Like this, I am not as well versed in Bakshi, so like I liked a lot of the
I like
animation
that. I like
style.
his art style.
Yeah,
Like,
it definitely works, and I like the technical elements of the live action with the animated and everything, the back and forth. Because it is riffing on something that Roger Rabbit did, and I think Roger Rabbit is just such a technical masterpiece that, like in this film, when like the eye contact is slightly off, like it's very noticeable, like it's not as crisp and polished. But I do think for an imitator that's trying to at least take it into a slightly darker place, like I think I definitely appreciate what this movie is going for, even though for me it's a little dated, and it does there are better versions of this template and this device and this format, but I do think it's like it's a cool, for lack of a better word, like cool exercise in just what you can do at the time with something that is normally seen as kids movie stuff like animation. So I thought it was a really cool film, a cool exercise in film, if that makes sense.
Also, I still don't know what Holly did wrong. Like, I mean,
they claimed that she killed Brad Pitt, but I'm pretty sure he just freaked out and fell.
Oh yeah, that did happen. But he came back as a cartoon, so that's fine.
He came back. Well, but he came back as a cartoon because they said she killed him. But I don't think she did. Like he let go.
Well, she did do the thing where she like sucked up his partner in the ink and the pen. She did do that. But he was fine.
I think that the 90s we had a much different idea of the authority that police should have. So I think just the fact that she went against the police guy's orders is probably enough in that case.
Well, I support women's rights, but also women's wrongs. So
yeah, that's right.
Yes. Cool. Any other thoughts on Cool World, and any last thoughts on this before we move
on? No, I think I've said.
Cool. That's it.
No.
All right. So, Matt, are we going alphabetically? Are we continuing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Cool. Let's go to FernGully then. Right. That's the next one in alphabetical.
That is the next one, and the only non-hybrid in this group.
Right. So proper animated.
Properly animated.
Yeah, which as you said, kind of like Avatar. I mean, that's the kind of basic premise. A little different, obviously, but sub Navi for fairies, and then there you go. That's it. But what about you, Chris? Like, what was your childhood nostalgia for it? And again, kind of the last one. Like, what is your recent viewing experience been like in comparison?
I have recently. Well, my nostalgia for it is definitely like back then. I think it just was of the time of the 90s where, and Matt, you might be able to speak to this as well. We were very eco-conscious. Like there were so many things like campaigns of like non-littering and, save the rainforest, plant trees, things like that. And this kind of it fit perfectly in that war, like that zeitgeist of the time.
I can speak on it. And I have to be careful because I might or might not work for a company that is responsible for some of this. But there was an initiative in the 90s it started in the 80s because certain drink manufacturers switched from bottles to plastic, from glass bottles to plastic bottles. And other companies were starting to use a lot more plastic as well. And that was causing a lot more littering because with glass, you could trade it in for money. But you couldn't with plastic. So plastic was being thrown away, and not just thrown away, thrown around. So there was an initiative amongst a bunch of different companies to put this, clean up your area, recycle, don't, ironize Cody with the tear. He was actually an Italian man.
He was Italian. He was an
Italian man, not a Native American. He had that single tear that rolled down his face. That was your people, Dylan. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I mean, he was Italian. That's not. I didn't mean the negativity. There was this initiative to clean this stuff up, and the reason was because these companies were being blamed for all of it, and they were like, look, what we're going to do to make this better, So we're going to create a situation wherein you have to clean up our messes now.
Yeah.
Isn't everything better?
It puts it off to the consumer.
It puts it off to the consumer. And that is a similar situation with this, is that a lot of stuff was also, a lot of media was being produced that was more eco-friendly to tell you, hey, be nicer to the trees so we don't have to be. That kind of thing.
Yes, very much so.
So this was part of that whole thing, I think.
And realistically, all of that was in my head this time, because I was just like, because as a kid, you don't know anything about the ins and outs and how, yes, recycling is the good thing to do, but no big change is going to come from like the singular effort, right? Like,
Right.
I didn't know the ins and outs as a kid. I was just like, oh, Tim Curry is the bad pollution monster. There's no question of like why he exists. He just exists out of a evil tree, right? Or something like it just doesn't matter. I don't know. But here's the thing: having to think about that, like watching it as an adult, it kind of lessens the moral of the story, right? Like just a little bit.
Yes, I agree.
The fact that I'm like 95% plastic now, like just internally, kind of lessens the message.
Yes, I agree. I think the idea of the message is obviously great, but it's also number one. It's nice to watch on the movie, but what are we doing to change it? Even that one guy's effort, at the end he becomes human, or goes back to human size, and it's like, I'm gonna change this. But like, dude, you were painting X's on trees. You're not in charge of anything that's actually going to make any changes. Like you can start initiatives, and maybe he goes above and beyond and does a lot more with it. But I don't know I was like, no, keep him small. Like, let him hang out with Krista for a while. Like,
well, and that's what the Avatar thing changes, where he's like, no, I'm gonna be one of you. I'm gonna like live and protect and preserve from this side rather than going back and fighting the man. But yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Yeah.
So it's so I'm watching it this time. I'm thinking about that in the way that I didn't think about it as a kid as well, and thinking, okay, so, and then especially because back then I didn't know about the whole like the whole environmental initiative initially was started by companies who wanted the consumers to fix their problems. Like I didn't know about all that. So now that I'm looking at all this, I'm like, okay, these companies, it's production companies who are owned by larger companies who obviously pollute a lot of the air, who use up a lot of our resources. They are putting this out there to say, hey, if you can, one person, you can make a difference. And then if enough of one of you makes this difference, you're going to make up for what we're doing bad, and we don't have to stop.
And essentially it hasn't changed, because like even a couple of years ago, it was just like, oh my God, the horrible weather patterns and the world's on fire is because you use that plastic straw.
Yeah. Exactly. It's all half measures to try to fix these things. And every time we take steps in the right direction, like trying to get the whole world to agree to fix these problems, it seems like every 4 years we vote in somebody who wants to stop doing that.
Like some sort of climate accord or something.
Some French thing. But go ahead, Dyl.
No, I mean, that's a great point. I haven't actually thought of it from that angle. I was merely thinking in the kids' angle, because I'm like, oh, this is part of nostalgia. This is a kids' movie. And I think for kids, like, this could be a good, at least, entryway to, like, just the broader, like, thinking about the environment, to where, like, I was very, like, pleased with the messaging. I was like, wow, like, this is a great message for kids to just, like, take care of their environment and, you know, be an advocate for it. But like, you bring in like the other side and perspective of it from the more adult side, both of you, and I'm thinking about it in different ways now too. So it's a very interesting, nuanced conversation, and that's why like media and art can be a great way to get a message across, but it ultimately also doesn't fix anything. You know, even, you know, like, you know, everyone's saying, oh, we're delaying the Oscars. All right, great, but like, while you televise the Oscars, why not make it a telecast to help try to get money
Mhm.
for the fire relief and like all these things where it's like, all right, you're doing a great job by pushing it, but then like you're not actively doing anything to help it. All you're doing is giving time for people to grieve, and it's kind of a similar idea in a way too. And I think
Yeah.
there's a reason why we see this remade in stuff like Avatar, and even like Happy Feet deals with a similar idea and theme as well. But I think it's also because there are new kids every generation who can use this message and who can experience it. But again, like media and the art we consume doesn't help either. It takes more than just one person and one thing or one movie.
Right. And that, which on the other side of that, and I think you're absolutely right, because it's essentially what I was saying before, but I do think that on the other side of that, art and changing minds today can change generations,
Right.
So
you got to get them while they're young. Yeah.
you got it. Yeah. So all of the, a lot of the kids who watch this movie, Chris and I are examples, are environmentally conscious now. We are
Right.
Yeah.
not only environmentally conscious, we are conscious of marginalized groups of people who are the victims of some of this stuff. And I think it does go back to that there was a push for that back then. While it wasn't in good faith, that push back then, I think it does make change. And I think that's why I say art, if it changes one mind, can change the world.
Yeah.
Just not immediately. It's not going to change it immediately. It's going to change minds. That's going to change.
Which is what the film itself is saying too. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And
So
also,
I'm
I
on
really
both
love
sides of that issue.
And that's the thing. And I do, and like I said, I like that I watched it as a kid because, like you were saying, Matt, I'm here to, like, even though I know it's more complicated, when you become an adult, you get the nuances of it, and it's more, complicated than just the environment is bad because you're not recycling or you love cutting down trees or something. Like, it's deeper than that. Because apparently, what company did this guy like in the film work for? Like, where they were just like, we're just cutting down these trees.
Well, there was and in the 90s there was a Save the Rainforest situation because we were being a little invasive, a lot invasive in
we were being a
rainforest
lot
back
invasive,
then. So there was that push, and that's also part of it. But again, no person watching this was going to stop that from happening.
Well, that's another point you bring up too, is that like the villains of it, aside from like Tim Curry obviously being like this like spiritual metaphor for something, like the actual man's building or men like knocking down the trees, they don't have a lot of personal characteristics that like feel like they mirror real life in the way that like, and I hate to keep bringing it to it, but like Avatar, like Giovanni Verbisi's character very much acts and talks and speaks. He like putts the golf ball. Like, it's a very specific type of person that they're trying to say. This is a very distinct parallel to where these are almost like nameless beings in a way, to where it does kind of take some of the bite out of it too, because it's like, you're not being able to give the other side anywhere to relate to and be like, oh shoot, I'm that person, in the same way that other films that have kind of envelop the idea further have been able to do, and like put a face to a name and be like, no, you are that guy, which a lot of great like political satires do as well. But this isn't that type of movie either. It is a movie for kids, so like they're very much trying to show you like, oh, you're the side that can help it, which is good. But also, they're like very nameless entities in a way, which may not help if you are looking at it from an older perspective as well. Who are these guys? What are they doing? What's their motive? They're just merely there as a plot device. But
And I will say, this is an example. This film is an example purely, I think, due to Robin Williams just being so great. Like, he plays the classic archetype of the animated sidekick character who's just kind of like dumb or silly or like gets in the way sometimes, but whatever. I normally hate that type of character in children's, like, even as a kid, like Mushu and Mulan, hated him. I thought it was annoying. Wow.
That makes sense.
I guess I've always been like a 35-year-old man, just even as a kid. I was like, oh my god, he's too silly. But I liked it. I liked Robin Williams' character in this.
I'm a I'm a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern guy, so it's
Oh, you love
that yeah. So that sidekick,
The bumbling sidekick.
the
Yeah.
bumbling sidekick thing, the Falstaff thing, that always that works for me.
Well,
And
yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like Robin Williams took this job after he had
A year
done
after Aladdin. Yeah.
Aladdin,
Yes,
and he took
and
it
that was
because they
actually
merchandised Genie, and he specifically did not want
told him
Disney
not
to
to.
merchandise and make like kids buy products that he lent his voice to.
Which is the point that I was actually about to make, that I didn't know Robin Williams was in this until I was watching the movie. And
Mm.
that is insane now. Like, that feels insane today that I wouldn't know that, but it's all because they didn't
they didn't merchandise.
They didn't use his name, capitalize on his name,
right?
The way he asked Disney not to. They didn't do for this, so
which is probably why it's not as I think ingrained in the cultural.
Oh yeah,
because like I mean the '90s, it's all Disney. Like the Don Bluth stuff really needed to try to like power. And I know this isn't Don Bluth, but like that era, like that felt like the one main kind of battler of Disney. But even then, like there were no Oscars, so like there were no other films winning anything. Like Disney was just the entire culture for animated film at the time. That's why I like films like this that, you know, that's still a kids movie, but have like these really deeper, darker themes and like, you know, even Cool World, like they're trying to do something different than just the Disney mold, which is important, but it still feels animation wise like something that would come out of Disney. It's just saying a very like deeper, darker message. And it's funny that years later they would like try to, you know, combat this with Pocahontas, and it just is not one of their best because I think they're trying too hard, you know, to kind of blend the Disney with the messaging. And I think this one, you know, they really do a good job teetering that balance well of being kid friendly and fun, fantastical, and having these great characters like Robin Williams' baddie character, but also having something important to say or something it wants to get across in a more meaningful way than just merely entertainment or telling a fairy tale that you've heard a million times. So I really think that's kind of where this film's strength is it offers this kind of good counter, same as like Land Before Time. Like there are some really good sneaky little animated films that I wish kind of got a bigger platform in the 90s because Disney was just consuming so much of it. But also it could kind of lend into the themes of this film of the consumer just kind of tearing down the rainforest that is animated films because it's trying to make the bucks and make the Oscars. And, you know, it could have this deeper meta meaning. You know, Robin Williams quite literally taking the job because he didn't want to be merchandised. Like, what does that say about the actual themes of this film as well? And I think that's kind of cool too, if you look in the meta subtext of it.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that always, and this was actually pretty common in the 90s animation, and I always thought it was kind of weird, and it kind of weirded me out, is when a character's hair is blonde, but their sideburns and eyebrows and everything else is brown. Like this character, they did it a lot back then, but I always thought that was weird. That's not important, but it just is the thing that I thought
and it's something I've never thought about, but now I'm like looking at pictures and I'm like, yeah, I know you're right. Like it happens a lot. That's funny.
But with Robin Williams, his character is really funny. It's also kind of not useful in this movie, really. When I say useful, it is entertainment, and that is what it's there for. But if you removed Batty from this movie, it really wouldn't change the movie itself at all. This is a weird tangent that I'm about to do. I think it did inspire Bartok from Anastasia, who
I could definitely see that.
Who was voiced by Hank Azaria. And then they did a direct-to-video sequel or spinoff that was just about Bartok the Magnificent. I'm not a huge fan of the Anastasia movie, and someone got me the VHS for Bartok the Magnificent when I was too old to want it. But I loved it because I was a big fan of Hank Azaria. And I was one of those weird kids who knew the names of the actors in movies, and especially weird that I knew that Gilbert Gottfried played Iago in Aladdin when I was that age. Was just kind of weird. No one else really knew that. I knew it. I knew who Hank Azaria was. I liked Hank Azaria. He was on Simpsons. So I really liked that straight to VHS video. That's not important to this conversation. I just need to mention it that while I don't really have strong feelings one way or the other about Anastasia, Bartok the Magnificent is my guy.
There
So
and not to kind of jump on that, I get you on Anastasia. Honestly, as a kid watching that, it felt like I was watching homework. It didn't. It was boring. Like just.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've actually never seen Anastasia, so I have no commentary to make on it. But yeah, I agree with Robin Williams. Like, I just feel like you don't need his character in the movie to have it function, but I do think it adds a little bit more something special, just because I think he also brought so much special to like everything he did, especially his voice roles. Like Genie on paper was a very fun role, but it was, you know, merely there to serve the kind of plot of like, oh, here are your 3 wishes, these are the rules of the story, and like I'll be your guide, moral compass type thing. But he made it his own by his added ad libs, and that's why it was tough with him in the recording booth. But it ended up being this masterful, like Oscar-worthy performance. Which
it was like a lightning in a bottle situation.
Right. And I think they were honestly maybe not trying to capitalize on that, but also be like, you know what, if we can get him, like, why not, and let him run loose. And like, I think the best stuff is that he is like a bat, so he's flying around, he's a little manic, but it works for the character he is, and it is in smaller spurts. It doesn't feel overwhelming. Like, I love when he's like quoting, like, it was he do Luke Skywalker, he quotes someone else as well when he's doing that like big flying tracking shot. Also, I will say, for an animated movie, and I know cinematography in animated movies, people don't think there is any, but like they are conscious of angles and stuff. The cinematography here is really good. Like, I love the way it just the camera navigates the rainforest, just the way they use the scenery and stuff, but especially with the baddie sequences flying and stuff. I don't know, it added a lot to me. Also because I'm such a fan of Genie and Robin Williams, but you know, so I just love that. Just that extra flair to the movie that I agree, Chris, like those characters can be annoying. I do like Mushu, but like there are characters like that. I know a lot of people also don't like Donkey and Shrek. I do, but there are characters like that in some movies that can be overwhelming. The latest I can think of is Awkwafina as Scuttle. Sorry, girl. But you know, like things like that. But I do think
I've heard that. I still haven't watched the Little Mermaid live action, but I've heard not great things about Awkwafina's Scuttle. But yeah.
But like that's another example of like, yeah, I think that character could get very infuriating soon, but I think just Robin Williams and just the use and the time and the resistance of using him too much helps this movie rather than hurts it. But yeah, let's move on to Rock-A-Doodle. Why don't we?
Rock-A-Doodle.
This is the Bluth one. This is the Bluth one. I already tipped his name.
Don Bluth.
Don Bluth, a legend in the animated world, who famously left Disney for similar reasons as Robin Williams. And it's I will say this is not my favorite of Don Bluth's movies. As someone who loves Don Bluth, this is one I also had never heard of. So maybe it's because I guess it hasn't been talked about a lot. I didn't know what to expect. But yeah, Chris, tell us about Rock-A-Doodle, your experience.
Well, I'm going to be honest. This is the weakest one of all 3, in my opinion. And I chose it not because I love it, but it is just nostalgic to me. And I think what calls back to that is, for some reason, this movie, which is on all the time. I don't know if like we owned a copy of it on VHS, and we had to have owned a copy. I just remember watching it a lot. And it's funny because I have no interest in Elvis Presley. Not particularly a fan of Elvis Presley, if I'm going to be completely honest. But like for some reason, this movie was my jam as a kid. Yeah, it does not hold up for me though as an adult.
I feel kind of the same way. Well, my dad was into Elvis, so I grew up fine with Elvis. But I remember when this came out, I was like, this Elvis chicken, that'll be fun. And then I watched it, and it was fun. But this was the toughest one to rewatch for me.
Oh God, yeah.
And I watched it with my wife too, and she was just not interested at all. Like she was like, she was not enjoying it. She was vocal about that. And I was like, none of us are enjoying it. Okay.
No, fair. And you know what? Honestly, put us through a lot here. It's just not a good movie. But again, it's one of the movies that just like smacks me in the head with just like nostalgia for me. Like, and I'm like, why did young Chris like this? And now think about it, it had to have been a situation where we just had it on tape. Like it had to have been one of those things. And just watched it a lot. Yeah. Because it's a cartoon. When you're a kid, you watch what's there. You don't like make the concerted effort to like, oh, I want to seek this out because I want to watch this. Kids might do that today now though, because there's a lot of streaming going on.
Right.
But back then it was just like, just gonna watch what's on, or I'm gonna watch what I have access to, and pretty colors, sounds, great. Like just
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I am an Elvis fan. Not like a fan of Elvis the person, but like I don't mind his music. I like his aura. I like his story. But like, yeah, I've always been interested in it. But like that doesn't like that makes for a good short film, like of a little chicken. Like it doesn't make an elongated like full length feature film for me. To where everything else is just like, yeah, I just feel like it borrows certain elements from other movies that just it's never stronger than. And like I kept trying to think like what is the message, because like the first two films at least there seem to be like morals and messages they're at least trying to get at, whereas this one it just feels like we're gonna make this fun kind of fantastical thing, and you know I don't know, I feel like there was something they could have really hammered home in terms of the messaging, but I was struggling to find it here, to where like what is fruitful for the kids in this one.
the message is owls are evil. Clearly,
Yeah, I guess,
owls
yeah.
are just bad,
Right.
and they want perpetual darkness because they're nocturnal. So,
Yeah, maybe.
like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it because the whole thing is like, oh, it's flooding. There's a flood. Like there should be something to say about this, maybe with like the environment as well. But it's really not. It's because this guy was told, oh, he doesn't actually have the ability to do this thing.
right.
You know, but then it's not really a Boy Who Cried Wolf story either. I don't know. It just yeah, I wasn't engaged, but it's got good
Well, that's the
animation.
thing. Like, did he truly thought that his crowing was bringing up the sun?
Hmm.
I guess he wasn't trying to like he wasn't scamming them or scamming. He wasn't like lying to these animals because he himself held this belief. But then when the sun still rises without him crowing, and the animals are immediately just like, "Oh, well, you piece of shit! Like, just leave this farm." And like, I don't understand what the moral is there.
I will say this. I will say that the most interesting, like that start to the movie, it had gives so much potential that was not
Thank you.
realized.
That's the best part of the movie.
Because when he realizes that devastation, when he realizes the sun rises without his help,
Hmm.
it's like, oh my god, this existential crisis. We could
Mhm.
we could have a movie here.
Yeah,
And we
like going
don't.
to like this journey to find himself and find
Yeah.
his self-worth. And then it's like, oh, your worth was that you were just there, and it'd be like, because why what does his absence have to do with the flood? Does it at all, or is it just merely coincidental?
I think it's just coincidental
Right.
because they want to kill the kid, right? Who
Yeah.
is
This movie
No,
now
yeah.
a
lost me,
kitten.
so I couldn't answer questions like this.
Right, because it feels like there should be a message of like, oh, he leaves, and that's when everything starts turning to shit because he was the rock of the group or he did something, but it really isn't. It's just like, oh, he has to come
But
back and save the day. But what is the
there's also a
consequence of him leaving?
mysticism because the
Right.
owls had dark magic on their side
Mm,
somehow. Like, didn't they
yeah.
thrust the world into perpetual darkness because they legit had magic?
Right. But
So, like,
then why even have to convince him to leave anyway? Like why not just do that while he's there? Like what did
he could have done that while he's there because, as
Right.
they established, he was not bringing like calling the sun
Right.
to rise. So
Right.
him being there is neither here nor there.
Right.
If we
It
didn't
makes it
find
feel like
that-
it's directly related. It's not.
That's the other thing is while I think that beginning is so great and has this existential thing and could have been a great movie, the inverse is true. If we had not found out, or if he had not found out that he couldn't raise the sun with his crow at the end of the movie, when he isn't able to bring the sun back up during the perpetual darkness, that would be interesting. Because if these characters thought he could bring up the sun, it would make sense that they're trying to stop him.
Mm.
Right.
But we learned that immediately. Like we learned that at the beginning of the movie. So I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah,
I
again,
don't
all the
know
other
what
animals, they were like,
Rock-A-Doodle is.
they
Or
treated
not
him like he was a
Rock-A-Doodle,
charlatan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it was
honestly,
if it was that he actually had the ability to do that and the owls took away his ability, convinced him
right.
he was worthless, he leaves and turns out he actually could bring up the sun, and then I don't know, and then that's when it all starts going to shit. But yeah, it just the details don't always line up, you know, and again, it doesn't really serve like what is the message aside from owls are evil, which like we knew. But
I
I've
mean, yeah.
always had a little fear of owls. Fake owls and like drawings of owls don't bother me, but like if I actually see an owl in the wild, it freaks me out. That's
Really?
just-
Wow.
yeah, just I don't know, the eyes and I don't know. this freaks me out. So, I could get on board with that message, but that's
Very
not a very
anti-adult.
hefty, weighty message. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the thing. I think as a kid, I liked the intro, the first like bit so much because I was like, that's a really cool. Like even as a kid, I'm like, that's a really cool idea. Like his whole worldview is like rocked. I'm like 5. I'm like, oh my god, his whole dynamic and how he sees the world has changed. What's gonna happen to him? Like, what's his hero's journey gonna be? And then that's just not paying off at all.
Yeah, they could have given us a nice lesson in existentialism, but they didn't. I will say this for it: the plus in it is I think that most of the voice acting is really, really good. I think all of these had good voice acting. The dog is played by obviously Phil Harris, who played Baloo in Jungle Book. And I think he's wonderful. I think he's really great. Oh, I need to mention that the guy who played the human, what's his name? The human small character in FernGully is the kid from Mac and Me.
Oh, the kid in the wheelchair?
Yeah, the kid from
Wow.
But that's just something I learned while I was watching that. But yeah,
fun fact. Framewreck fact. My last thing about the voice acting, I do actually really like in Don Bluth movies, is true with American Tail with 502, that they actually have kids voicing kids.
I was going to say that, yeah.
It's cute. It's really cute. And like that little kid, the storyline is a little but like I really think he's like, it's cute. I'm like, oh, like
his voice acting is very cute. Every time he called out for Chanticleer, it was very cute.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about this movie.
Rock-A-Doodle.
It's just not a good movie.
But that happens. Like when I did my Nostalgia Junction of my like childhood favorites that I watched again like repeatedly because I own them, so why not? Shark Tale I watched nonstop, and then we rewatched it. And I was like, yeah, Shark Tale's not that good. So it just happens. I mean, but that's what's cool. It's like kind of reassessing your childhood, because there are movies that are great that you watch as a kid, and then it's like, oh, okay, like I was watching good shit. So it works both ways. But this is not always. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but yeah.
Well, that's Chris's, and what do we call it?
I think I did the alliteration of Chris's cartoon, like Chris's nostalgic cartoons. I think that sounds the best.
Okay.
I don't know, right? Yeah,
Probably.
we can call it whatever.
Sounds
We call
fine.
it whatever we want.
these are the movies that Chris watched all the time, like when he was a kid.
Overall, Chris, I want to know, as a whole, how did it feel revisiting these classics from your childhood?
Good. I will say, I walked away from this wanting to find a copy of Cool World on VHS,
Nice.
just so I can own that. That would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I want to know why my parents thought it was okay for me to watch Cool World. And again, I think it's because it had like a level of animation to it.
Mhm.
And also, my parents really didn't monitor what I watched, not gonna lie. Like, grew up watching a lot of horror.
The
So
90s, man.
that's not, it was the 90s. Literally. It was just like, am I starting a fire? No, then just watch whatever you're gonna watch.
I was doing both, but
Yeah, I mean
the adult cartoons kept me from the fires for a bit.
But that's a good that is a good marketing tactic though, because a lot of parents were probably like, "Oh, it's animated, sure, yeah, we'll buy it for you."
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was it. You know, I don't think they needed to like, because how often would parents actually sit down and watch a movie first to make sure it's appropriate for their kid? Probably not a lot, unless they saw it in theaters. So I mean, like, I think it was just like, "Oh, it's animated, great, here you go." You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I had similar experience where I was just like watching these movies. It's like, okay, I see for the most part what I valued in these as a kid, but mostly they're just not for me anymore. Especially Rock-A-Doodle. Cool World, I kind of feel like I should watch again without the shock of everything that happens in it, and see how I feel a little bit more, because like I said, there's a lot in that movie I really, really like, but then there's a lot that's just like, wow, what the hell
there's
is
some
happening?
weird stuff in there.
Yeah.
Like the chemistry between Brad Pitt and his mom. Like, I feel like they had, like, I don't know.
Yes.
They had some chemistry.
I felt the same way. when I was watching this movie, it reminded me of Dune Part 2 when I'm like, are
Yeah.
Timothy Chalamet and what's her name about to fuck? Like, because
Rebecca
that's what it
Ferguson.
feels like's about to happen.
There was chemistry, and I'm like, and obviously I didn't hit on that as a kid, but like, I'm like, wait a second.
No, yeah, I noticed that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was fun revisiting these.
Yeah.
I wish we're gonna have to have you back on so we can watch Bebe's Kids.
Yes.
I would love that.
Listen, there's so many nostalgic films. We could keep going. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, I was just about to say, as someone who hadn't seen any of these films, I do at least appreciate that, like, as someone who was nostalgic for pretty much only Disney in that era, I'm glad to at least see this other side of animation that was still happening, and making sure that these films, even if they're not the best in certain facets, are still being in the conversation and talked about. Like, we're keeping them alive, essentially, because it feels like that era, it's, like, so dominated by one specific thing that I love that we're shedding light. Like, all the animated films we talked about on Nostalgia Junction are these 3 films and a DreamWorks Shark Tale. Like, we haven't covered any Disney animated films yet. So
we did Page Master also, which is not Disney.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Yeah, we're highlighting animation.
Page Master initially was on my list.
Page Master was on his list, and I was like, "Bud, we did that in the first episode."
It kind of fits. It feels a little similar to Rock-A-Doodle in the kid animation.
Well, if we had done that instead of FernGully, it would have been all hybrid movies. Right. But yeah. So, but yeah. It was. This was a lot of fun. We have to have you on again.
Yeah, and if you were watching the show, I was about to say, if you're watching the show and you have like all these nostalgic favorites of your childhood, and you want to like be on our show and pitch us, you can find us. Comment down below, be like, "Oh, I love these movies. Have me on to talk about it," because I love the idea of having other guests come in and kind of like getting to watch their childhood favorites, because they might not always be mine and Matt's, and there's other pockets of nostalgia for different people that like we just haven't explored yet, which I love. But Matt, you were about to tease next month.
Yeah, well, next month we are
going to cover Disney. Sorry.
Next month we are going to be covering either mine or Dill's. It's going to be Dill. Because the nostalgia train has not stopped. Our next Nostalgia Junction is going to be Dylan's
Disney Delights. There you go.
Disney Delights.
Disney Delights.
Dylan, tell us about what we're going to watch.
So obviously, if you guys watch the Pickle Awards, which this is airing after, but we're filming before, we are actually, the channel's taking a big change. I booked a gig that is going to consume basically the rest of the year. I'll be traveling, so I am not going to be able to produce as much stuff on this channel as I want to, and Matt and I especially aren't going to be able to record the show regularly. So this is going to kind of be our last for a little bit of time, as we have a little bit of a hiatus. So we wanted to kind of end this New Year nostalgia with some of my favorites, because we covered Matt's in January, we're covering Chris's now, and in March we'll be covering some of mine. But because of just without specifying what the job is, I mean, people could probably connect the dots, but it is we're going to do my Disney favorite, my favorite Disney childhood films that I watched growing up. So we thought it'd be fun for me to pick 2 and then have the audience vote for the third. And I just checked the poll, and there is an overwhelming winner at this point, so I will announce it. But the first film we're going to be watching is the first film I ever saw in theaters, which is the Tigger movie, big Winnie the Pooh kid. So we're going to be watching that.
I love the Tigger movie.
Yes, and then we'll be watching a one that I watched a little older, as a little bit of an older kid, but kind of started my superhero obsession, which is Sky High. So we're doing it in live action as well. And then I put up a poll on the Facebook page for people to vote for the 4th film, because I couldn't decide. So I have another animated one, which is the Mickey, Donald, Goofy, Three Musketeers, which I watched a lot as a kid. That was a big car ride fave. I watched it in the car a lot. I wasn't driving the car, I was a kid. Underdog, which was another kind of fun, like superhero inspired one. The Game Plan, which actually started my crush on Madison Pettis. I was her age at the time, so I was a child who liked a child. And now I've grown up also having her as a crush still, because she's my age. But
she's no longer a child.
She's no longer a child, so she can still be my crush. But the one that got the audience winner vote was actually The Haunted Mansion, which is a great one because it was inspired by a ride. It was in the wave of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but it hasn't been necessarily as appreciated by mainstream audiences as much as Pirates was. But it was one I watched a lot as a kid because I was a big Eddie Murphy fan from Daddy Daycare and Shrek. So I'm very excited to check out that film again. So that'll be the 3rd film there. So the films that we are covering: Tigger movie, Sky High, The Haunted Mansion. And Matt has seen them all, but so he'll be reassessing them. But none of them were his childhood nostalgia favorites. So it'll be kind of pulling from my nostalgia, but him kind of reassessing on his own terms. But Matt, you excited for that? That's late.
I'm very excited because I saw Sky High in theater and was blown away. I love that movie. Tigger movie. I grew up in the era of Winnie the Pooh. There were like 3 different Winnie the Pooh movie or shows on TV back then. One of them was live action with like puppets, and it was
Book
awesome.
of Pooh.
Book of Pooh, yes. So that was on back then as well. It was there was a lot of, so I was a big Winnie the Pooh guy, and Tigger was always my favorite. And so when that movie came out, even though I was a little old for it, I was not the target audience. I still watch it. I love it.
You'll find out who my favorite was. It may surprise you on the next one. Don't say it if you know it, but
I think I know it. But we'll move on. But Haunted Mansion. It's funny because I also grew up loving Eddie Murphy, and the things that you love about him were just the downfall of Eddie Murphy in my life.
No. Except
for Shrek. Shrek was his last like high point. It was like his last like high point before he went down, and then Dolomite is my name, and that SNL episode happened, and then it's
Shrek. He's coming back.
What's that?
Shrek 5 is coming out next year, so he'll be back. He's coming back.
But we saw the 3rd and 4th ones. If they are any indication,
but he was not the problem.
That's true. That's true.
That'll be exciting though, because I know you don't love that movie, so it'll be cool to see. Also, because I definitely haven't seen Haunted Mansion in a while. I watch Sky High pretty regularly, and I haven't seen Tigger movies since I was a kid. So this will be a really cool one for me as well. Kind of like with Chris today, where like he hasn't watched some of these in a long time, some of these recently, some of these not so recently. So, Chris, any thoughts on that slate from what you heard?
Oh yeah, that's good. I mean, I have never seen The Haunted Mansion.
Ooh. Okay.
And I might be revealing too much about myself right now, but was Pirates of the Caribbean based on a ride?
It was, yeah, at Disney World.
No idea.
Yeah.
But
So that was the wave.
I've only ever seen the 3rd one in that series.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the Pirates, Haunted Mansion, and then like they did it recently with like Jungle Cruise. But like, yeah, they were trying to make it a thing where they would like take these rides and adapt them into and like try to give a story to something very simple and 2 minutes long. And you know, we'll talk about it.
They did do a Tower of Terror movie before they did Pirates, but that was,
it didn't catch on quite as much. And they also did the Country Bears, which I thought about for this, but I was like, that was a nostalgic one that I hated as a kid, and I was like, it would be cool to see if I hate something as a kid and like it more as an adult. But I was like, I don't think that's gonna happen. So we didn't do the Country Bears, but that is gonna be the slate for next month as our little farewell for a while. We will be back, and the good news is Matt has his own channel now, so it's not like you're not gonna see Matt and you're not gonna see me and Matt. Like I'm gonna be in a few more little things on Matt's channel throughout the year, but also he has so much going on there. He's flourishing there, so it's great that we can kind of like he can focus on that for the next few months after our little hiatus, during our little hiatus. And Chris is also there frequently as well, so it'll be
putting
really
out good
fun.
episodes.
Yeah, very good episodes.
Good content.
Yeah, Chris, where else can they find you though? And anything to plug?
Just my Letterboxd, my Blue Sky. It's cellar door floor. That's pretty much where I am everywhere with socials. So yeah, and just look out for me.
Yep, he's around. You can find me, actually, I am now on Blue Sky too. Dylan Randazzo at Blue Sky. It's very easy. I didn't have to put any underscores or anything like that. If you still want to find me on Twitter though, there is an underscore between my name, my first and last, and same as my Letterboxd underscore. So either try my name. If you don't find it, put an underscore between the first and last, and you'll find me somewhere. Matt, anywhere they can find you, anything to plug? Obviously, I already kind of started, but continue plugging.
Well, the name of my channel is Matty Loves Movies. We do a lot of really fun there. I have a show called Camp Film Camp where we talk about campy films. We have a show called Cinema Soapbox where we do like TED Talk style film presentations, and then a panel discusses it. All-time top 5 where we list top 5 movies in a category, but we don't reveal the category, and other people have to try to guess what the category is. And then I'm also doing a 52-week movie challenge right now, where every week I watch movies based on a certain on a predetermined theme, and then I make a video about that. So every week you can expect that for the rest of this year, and we'll see what next year does. But yeah, I'm gonna miss this show. I'm gonna miss doing this show every month. But hopefully Dylan and I will be able to get back together at some point during the hiatus and film something. But I'm gonna miss it.
We'll be back before you know it, and check us out because we're gonna try to make a priority of my hiatus, because we will be still doing something. I'll be doing my own individual stuff as much as I can while I'm away, but because of just scheduling, I'm not gonna be able to do a lot of stuff with co-hosts. But Chad and I are gonna try to bank a few episodes of Picture This. Kelsey and I are gonna try to do a monthly Marvel-ous Movie Mondays because she has like a time free when I have time free. But we're gonna try to figure out as much as we can. But we are gonna also prioritize the TikTok because it is back. It is still alive. We're not going to thank him for bringing it back because he's the reason it went away. But it is back, so we're gonna try to prioritize also doing some stuff.
He came back under Joe Biden, so it's fine.
Yeah, true. But thank you guys. You can find us there. Thank you, Chris, as always, for being a guest. It was so much fun getting to watch these movies. Yeah, of course. Our longest running guest. You have that title probably for a little while because you got a lot of episodes with us, but you're holding on to that crown. But thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for next month, our little farewell episode of Dyl's Disney Delights. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
What a story, Mark.